Thank you to the school district, the principal, superintendent, and especially Mr. Tollison for the invitation. He's very persuasive on the telephone. I live in northern New Jersey, a bedroom community of New York City, and somehow he tracked me down, so I'm delighted to be here. I have 4 children myself who've all gone through high school and college, and in fact are all married, aged 31 to 41. But I've got 9 grandchildren as well, the oldest of whom is 15 years old in 11th grade, so she could be sitting out there with you. So this is important to me too, to be here. Our company, Eurobrokers, was located in the south tower of the World Trade Center complex. We occupied the entire 84th floor. Each floor in the World Trade Center was 208 feet by 208 feet, just about the size of an acre. I'm going to give you some housekeeping so you can follow my story a little better. Each tower was 107 stories tall. At the 44th floor and the 78th floor were sky lobbies. For me to get to my office on the 84th floor, I would ride an express elevator to the 78th floor, cross quite a wide hallway that ran the entire length of our tower, the south tower, and find a local elevator to take it up to the 84th floor. If you worked on the 50th floor, you would ride an express to the 44th, cross a similar hallway, and find the local elevator up to 50. If you worked on the 30th floor, it was strictly a local elevator from the ground floor. So there was those 2 sky lobbies you need to think about as we go through this story. In each of the 2 towers were crossed hallways, one running north-south, one running east-west. They met in the very center of the building, and around those 2 hallways was core, and then the exterior of the building was outside that. So the rentable space for tenants was all the way around that core, the entire floor. As I said, our offices were on the 84th floor. One more housekeeping detail. To give you the layout of the 16-acre site of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan, I want you to imagine in your mind a 3x3 grid. Sudoku or tic-tac-toe, whatever games you're playing these days, and number those boxes in your mind. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The North Tower was in box 1, and the South Tower was in box 8. So they were offset, but not on a pure diagonal. Okay? My personal office was on the west side of box number 8. Near the south wall, right about here, in that grid that you're looking at. My normal commute from northern New Jersey was about 1 hour and 10 minutes from doorknob to doorknob. My typical commute would be a ride to a train station, about a 50-minute train ride to Hoboken, New Jersey. I would get on what was called the PATH train, a subway system that went under the Hudson River into the bowels of the World Trade Center, up 4 or 5 flights to the main shopping level, an indoor shopping level throughout the whole 16-acre site, and then 1 floor above was an outdoor plaza. But from the lower of those 2 lobbies, you would get the express elevator and ride up to our floor, to 78 and then 84. So I did that morning. It was a beautiful blue sky day, not quite as hot as it is here today, but same sky, pure blue sky. I arrived at my office at about 7:15, walked once around the trading floor. Our business was international capital markets, so our customers were the large financial institutions. Our customers were Morgan Stanley, Chase Manhattan Bank, Barclays Bank in London, Fuji Bank in Tokyo, and so on, about 300 of the largest financial institutions in the world. We did not talk to retail customers, so most of you have never heard of a company like Eurobrokers. We just talk to the wholesale market. A lot of screaming and yelling on telephones. If you like pressure and thrive on it, it was kind of fun. I certainly enjoyed the job. So I got to work at 7:15 as normal, walked around our trading floor, got back to my personal office because I'm now management. It's a young person's game to be a broker. I did that for many years, but now I'm management. Typing away at my keyboard on the 84th floor, my back to the windows, as close as these curtains are to me right now. At 8:46, there was a loud boom, boom and my head jerked up because our lights buzzed, and then my peripheral vision caught something behind me. I spun around, and 84 floors in the air, right against the glass, swirling flames. What I thought had happened, which was incorrect, was that there was an explosion a couple of floors up. I thought a welder had hit a gas line, something like that, and had caused an explosion, and the flames had come out of our building just above me. That was wrong. What had happened, back to the grid, okay, North Tower. The North Tower was hit on the north side, on the 93rd floor. The plane went right through the building, the explosion was inside the building, and the flames went out the south side of that building through boxes, in your mind, boxes 4 and 7. Well, box 8, where I'm sitting, the flames went right through box 7, and the flames were right against my glass. They had mass as they burned, and down they went. They fell with gravity past my window. So that is what happened, but that's not what I thought had happened. After the 1993 bombing, I had volunteered to be a volunteer fire marshal on our floor. They had asked executives to do that because the theory was if the boss says stay or go, people will pay attention. That's the theory. Didn't exactly work that way that day, and I'm glad it didn't. Because when I came out of my office with my flashlight that the World Trade Center had provided me and the whistle around my neck, I advised everybody, just go to the center corridor and wait further instruction. That's what we were instructed to do as fire safety marshals. People did that, but they kept going. Downstairs, down elevators, they just took off, thank goodness. We had about 250 people on our floor, and over the next 15 minutes, all but about 50 people had departed. I came out of my office telling people to begin to move to the center corridors, and the brokers who were on the east side of our floor walked up to the north windows, so they're over here, and they walked up to these windows and could look up 9 floors up to the northwest and saw a ring of fire around the 93rd floor. And so we knew fairly quickly the damage was next door. I went into our trading floor up to those north windows, but I had heard that there were people starting to jump. I did not want to see that myself. I didn't want that memory, that image. So I stood back from the glass about 5 yards. And a girl, Susan Polio, a co-worker, spun around because she had just seen somebody jump. She didn't know people were jumping when she went to the window to look. She ran back to me in tears. She said, "Oh, Brian," she said, "people are dying." And I said, "Susan, I know." I put my arm around her. "Come on, let's get you a little more composed." And I walked her into that, one of those hallways, walked her from the east side to the west side, left her in the ladies' room in that section of the hallway, went back to my office, and I called my wife in northern New Jersey. Now it's about 5 to 9. Called my dad in Toronto, said, "Dad, turn on the TV," just like I told my wife. "Something's happened next door, but I want you to know that we're okay." Put the phone down, and the strobe lights flashed. The siren gave a little whoop whoop, and the public address system came on at about 3 minutes to 9, saying, "Your attention, please. Building 2 is secure. If you're in the midst of evacuation, you may use the re-entry doors and the elevators to return to your office." Repeat, building 2 is secure. And they went through the announcement again. Well, definitely the pressure's off now. The trouble's next door. We're going to be fine. I continued to the to the west side trading floor, and I came nose to nose with a fellow named Bobby Call, C-O-L-L. I said, "Hey, what's up, Bobby?" Just started a casual conversation with him. And he was telling me that he had been down 5 to 10 floors, heard the announcement, and had just run back upstairs because our building was secure. And boom, boom, in the middle of that sentence, our room absolutely fell apart. It was 9:03. I didn't know what had happened, but I knew in that split second that it was terrorism. What had happened, again back to the grid, the South Tower got hit on the south side. Plane came from this direction, from the west slightly, and hit the far corner, the easterly corner of the south wall. I've got to do this map backwards to explain it to you. And if you've seen the clips, as the plane approached the building, it almost looked like it was going to miss, and it dipped, and the right wingtip went up. And the right wingtip, I learned later from somebody who was closer to the east side of our floor, the right wingtip went right through our trading floor. I was on the west side of this 208-foot wide building, and all I heard was this tremendous double boom again, thump, thump. And as I said, our room fell apart. Everything came out of the ceiling, speakers, air conditioning ducts, lighting, the whole false ceiling, of course. Our training floor was up on raised floor, 2x2 concrete, a couple of inches thick, up on pedestals. All those slabs went out of square. Walls toward a jagged angle. The room was instantly filled with white, chalky, gritty, filthy air. No smoke, no flames that I could detect at that moment. And then, for the next 10 seconds, I was terrified. And fortunately for me, that was the only 10 seconds of the day that I was terrified. That was the moment when I felt like I couldn't do anything about me. Something was happening to me that I couldn't sort of deal with. What happened was, because we got hit on that corner, the building torqued and it swayed. The building went one direction toward the Hudson River, toward the west. This will sound like a gross exaggeration, but I promise you it's my experience. The building went one way 6 to 8 feet. It stopped after 5 seconds and slowly came back to vertical. Creak, 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 and then there was a noticeable jerk as all the steel realigned. And it was at that moment that I sobered up, if you like, a feeling washed over me. Brian, you're going to be all right. I reached in my pocket for that flashlight that I put in 17 minutes earlier, and I shone it around this filthy, aired room, and I gathered up 6 co-workers, and I led them into the hallway. And if you imagine this crossed hallway as actually 4 hallways meeting in the middle, the westerly hallway that we were in had no fire escape in it. As I got to that intersection, my intention was to turn right to stairway A. I could have gone ahead to stairway B. Turn right to stairway C. I could have gone ahead to stairway B or turn left to stairway A. But I, as the fire safety guy, my responsibility was stairway C. So that was my intention. But as I got to that intersection, I can't explain this, I felt this push on my right shoulder. I don't know what it was, but there was nobody there, but it pushed me around to the left to stairway A. I went with it. You know, it didn't matter to me which stairway I was in. But with the fullness of time, we've learned there are no stories like mine. Nobody else was able to get down stairway C or B. I was led, if you like, to stairway A, even though I was first in line with the flashlight. We started down stairway A. Between each floor, the stair would go this way and that way, that way, all the way down the building. As we went down only 3 floors, we got to the 81st floor landing, and as I went around that corner with this group of people following me in a single file, a heavy-set woman emerged from below, and she stopped me on that landing, and she refused to let me go by. She said, "You can't go down, you can't go down, there's flames. She referred to a small, by comparison, gentleman she was coming up the stairs with. We just come off a floor in flames and there's smoke and you've got to go higher." And she just was absolutely insistent that we not go by her. And of course everybody went bump, bump, bump in behind me, and now we've got this group of 9 people on this landing on the 81st floor. And people started to debate up, down, what should we do? And I'm sort of putting my light in the face of whoever's talking, and I was distracted. There was this banging noise inside the 81st floor, and a muffled scream, and I bent over and dropped out of this conversation and just struggled to hear what this person was saying. And a stranger was screaming for help. "Help, help, I'm buried. Is anyone there? I can't breathe." When I realized what the person said, I just instinctively grabbed the shoulder of the person beside me, Ron DiFrancesco, a co-worker of mine. I said, "Come on, Ron, we got to get this guy." I don't think Ron knew what I was talking about, but he dutifully came with me. The door frame had blown off the wall. The door was locked, but the frame was off the wall, so we could push the drywall back and squeeze sideways through this crack in the wall. And I have this very sad, distinct memory of all my co-workers turning around and going up the stairs, and they all died that day. Bobby Call was one of them, Kevin York another. They were on each side of the heavy-set woman's, the strange woman's elbows. They're saying, "It's okay, lady, we're in this together, we'll help you." So they were doing great things that day. It was an unfortunate decision they made, not a wrong decision. They were given information and they were dealing with it as it came to them. With the fullness of time, yes, they died. So very sad, but they didn't do something wrong. They, in fact, were doing something right at the time, helping somebody. Ron and I went in on the 81st floor. The stranger was probably 20 yards away. Halfway to the stranger, and the smoke now is swirling pretty heavily on this 81st floor, halfway to the stranger, right beside me, I'm saying, just 2 feet away from me, Ron, my coworker and buddy, was completely overcome by the smoke. Coughing and sputtering, he went off the floor, back to the stairs, and he went up. And around me, I noted it at the time, was this bubble of fresh air, inexplicable to me. Clean, fresh air is what I was breathing. So, when I said, well, okay, I'm good, Ron's gone, but I'm going to carry on with my flashlight. And if you can imagine, my flashlight was just disappearing into the particles of smoke. If you've had your high beam headlights on a foggy country road at night, you just, the beam kind of disappears without you seeing anything. That's what it was like on the floor at that time. As I got closer to the stranger, and he's directing me kind of left, right, to his voice, when I got close to him, he said, "Can you see my hand? Can you see my hand?" I couldn't see anything. And then suddenly this waving hand down near the floor he's making motions like this, and I shone the light on his arm and up to his face, and there was these 2 beady eyes sort of poking through a hole in the wall with his hand out, waving like this. And as soon as he realized I'm focusing on his eyes, he said, "Hallelujah, I've been saved." I said, well, come on, let's get you out of there. I was focused on the task, removed a bunch of debris. And when he extricated himself a little bit from the hole and some stuff that was burying him on the other side, we realized he was separated from me by an immovable wall. There was debris everywhere around it, and this wall in front of us separating us. I stood a desk up on its end, I climbed up on it, and the false ceiling had caved in, so I was able to get up over the wall and look down into the pit where he was. And I said, "The only way out of there is for you to come up." And he scrambled up once. I missed him. I hooked him under his arm the second time. I lifted him up, heaved him up over the wall. We fell down on the rubble, him on top of me, and he gave me a great big kiss. He said, I said, "Whoa, I'm Brian," and stood up dusting myself off, and I put my hand out to shake his hand, and he said, "I'm Stanley." He said, "We'll be brothers for life." And I said, well, I don't have any brothers or siblings. I said, "Yeah, we can be brothers for life." And he had a puncture wound on his left palm, and I had a gash on my right palm, and I'm the one who did it. I confess, it's not the thing you do in this day and age, but I'm the one who did it. I am the one who smushed our hands together, and I said, in fact, we'll be blood brothers for life. Put my arm around him, and Stanley and I found our way back to the stairs with my flashlight. Stanley is an Asian Indian, born and raised in Guyana in South America, about 10 years younger than me. We are not brothers. You would not mistake us for brothers, but we are now blood brothers. I'm going to interrupt my story and tell you Stanley's brief story. Stanley worked on the 81st floor, as I told you, for Fuji Bank. Back to the grid here, Stanley's office was on the south wall, looking out over New York Harbor and the Statue of Liberty. And he didn't know that the North Tower had been hit, but when he saw some debris falling from this tower, he called them fireballs. And somebody else in his office noticed that, and they made their way to the local elevator. This would be at 5 to 9. To the local elevator, down to the 78th floor, across the hall, down to the ground floor. As they were going through the turnstiles, the security guard said, "Where are you going? Your building's secure. You're just getting in the way of the traffic coming out of One World Trade Center." Peer pressure put them all back on that elevator. Up they went to the 78th floor, across the hallway, back to their offices, and as Stanley walked into his office on the south side of the South Tower, the phone was ringing. He picked up the phone, and a woman from his Chicago office said, "Oh, no, I didn't want anybody to answer the phone. You got to get out. Don't you know what's happened?" "No, what's happened?" "They're telling us our building's secure. An airplane hit the North Tower. You got to get out of there." And he's on the phone looking out over New York Harbor as the second plane starts to approach. And he starts to compute, because you got to figure we know nothing really, right? As she's telling him all this, this plane is bearing down on our building, getting larger and larger, and he sees the U on the tail and realizes what's about to happen. As it got closer, he said at the last moment it dipped and that right wing went up, and he dove under his desk at the last moment. You can imagine the deafening roar that happened to him on the 81st floor, because big parts of the wing went through his floor, but away from him. He was temporarily deafened. He swam through debris, he says, up toward where he knew the stairway was, and then everything caved in on him. He couldn't get past that last wall. He's deaf, he's seeing this light dancing out in the hallway, and that's when he started screaming for help. And he says, my light kind of floated over the debris. He couldn't hear anything, and he's yelling, yelling, yelling. And then when the light was in his eyes, hallelujah, I've been saved, he said. So that's his story. And there's thousands of stories that happened that day to people, but that's a real personal one for Stanley. So back we are on the 81st floor. We went out to the landing, and the smoke was coming up the stairs, but I shone my light down, and I thought, I don't see any flames. I got to try this. Let's go. And we stepped. That first step was significant as down we went, removing a lot of debris, mainly drywall, sheetrock that had crashed in on the stairways, water underfoot, smoke. On the 78th floor, the wall was cracked and the flames were sort of licking up through the crack, but we could get by. I don't remember the sensation of heat at all. I'm still in this bubble of fresh air somehow. On the 74th floor, we broke into what I would consider to be almost normal conditions, but for an inch of water cascading underfoot from broken pipes, the lights were on, fresh air is coming from below, and I felt for the second time like, we're okay, I'm going to make this. In our entire descent, we overtook nobody. Nobody overtook us. Our building had evacuated in that 17-minute span, but for a few people. If the proportions were the same as they were on our floor, 4/5 of the people were out of the building. One exception. On the 68th floor, walking up the stairs, Jose Marrero came around the corner, co-worker of mine carrying a walkie-talkie. And I said, Jose, where are you going? What are you doing? And he said, I can hear Dave Vera up above. And Dave Vera had been in my group carrying a walkie-talkie. He said, well, several guys in our fire safety team were carrying walkie-talkies. He said, I can hear Dave Vera up above. He's helping people. I'm going up to help him. I said, well, I'm getting this guy from Fuji Bank out. Stanley did look pretty beat up, ripped shirt and everything else. And he said, that's okay. I'm okay. I'll be okay. And up he went. And of course, Jose died that day. 32 years old, classy guy, my hero. Up he went. Last time I ever saw Jose, or anybody maybe saw Jose. We continued on down. We got to the lower of the two sky lobbies, 44th floor, and we went in there to get some information, if you like. Now, Stanley had, of course, by this time told me that it was an airplane, but we wanted to learn more information. And in the middle of that 44th floor hallway, 208 feet long from glass to glass, a security guard was standing at his desk, and he's all alone, it appeared, in the whole floor. And he said, do you have telephones? We said, no, we don't have phones. He said, well, I'll stay with this guy. And he backed up, and behind his desk was a man with massive head injuries and back injuries, mumbling, semi-conscious. How he got those injuries, how he got to the 44th floor, I have no idea. But this security guard was on duty, putting his life at risk to save this man. He said, when you can get to a phone, you must get a medic and a stretcher up to the 44th floor for this man. I said, I understand. Back to the stairs we went, down, down, down. On the 31st floor, we got into Oppenheimer's space. And I know it was the 31st floor because I've looked at the directory since, so there's records of this. But coincidentally, our offices used to be on the 31st floor. I knew it was a re-entry door. We had moved just after the 93 bombing from the 31st floor to the 84th floor, so I was familiar with that floor. But why we went in to make a phone call, I have no idea. If the security guard's phones don't work on 44, why should Oppenheimer's phones work on 31? But we got into their conference room, and I got dial tone. At 25 minutes to 10, it's about a half an hour after our building had been hit, I called home. Statistically, I should have got a busy signal because our phone was just ringing off the hook at home, I'm told. My wife picked up the phone and I told her, oblivious to any pain they're going through. You remember I called her just before 9. She turned on that TV, and right where I had telephoned from, 2 minutes later, kaboom, she saw this explosion. So for half an hour, she's quite concerned, to put it mildly. Our house had filled up with friends from our church, from our neighbors. 3 of my 4 children were in the area. They were there. So there was maybe 15 or 20 extra people in the house with her when I connected. Hi, honey. I'm on the 31st floor. I got a good story to tell you. Got to go now. I want to get out of the building, but I just thought I'd check in. Put the phone down. She turned around and announced to the room full of people, Brian's okay. He's on the 31st floor. He'll be out of the building in 2 hours. I did not say that, but she remembers after the 93 bombing, it took me 2 hours to get out of the building from the 31st floor because of the congestion in the stairways. For 2 hours, we had gone left, right, down 31 floors. You sort of hand on the shoulder of the person ahead of you. So they're all thinking, I'll be out of the building in 2 hours. Well, by calculations, just to jump ahead in the story, our building collapsed 25 minutes later. So you can imagine what was going on in everybody's minds back at my home. Stanley and I, he called his wife at her workplace. Actually, he didn't connect with her, but he left messages. And I called 911, the emergency number. I was on that phone call for 3 minutes and 17 seconds. And I know that time exactly because I listened to my own recording about 3 months later when the 911 Commission did all their interviews. I was transferred twice. I talked to 3 different people to tell them about the man on the 44th floor. That's how chaotic the emergency number was that day. I recognize and acknowledge it was unprecedented conditions, but in an emergency of that magnitude, you would like to think you just have to tell one person the details and then get the heck out of there. But for 3 minutes and 17 seconds, I talked on the phone. Some of it, sections on hold. Back to the stairs, down, 15th floor. I said to Stanley, hey, cool it, Stan, you know, we're moving too quickly, or I don't want to come in tomorrow, you know, to come clean up my office, come in on crutches. Little did we know what was about to happen. So we slowed down a bit. Got to the plaza level, which is the upper of those 2 lobby areas that I was talking about, and we looked out, here we are, back to the grid. We're looking now at box 5, where the fountain was, and flowers, and tourists, and vendors with their carts, and business people coming and going usually, and we're looking now at an ashen gray space, looked like an archaeological site that had been abandoned for hundreds of years. Carnage, I didn't see any. I don't know if my mind is blocking that out, but I saw no bodies, thank you. Back behind us was an escalator. We went down that. The electricity was off. At the bottom of that escalator, a female security guard or female policewoman, I'm not sure, but a woman at least, said, you can't go through the lobby here, guys. Here we are in this tower. Can't get out on Liberty Street. You got to go through the shopping area and out box number 9. She didn't say box 9, but you know what I mean. So I said, okay. So we walked very casually through the shopping area. There was no panic. There was firemen pulling on their gear, thinking about what they were about to do. As we got to the doors to exit on the south side of box number 9, it was actually 4 World Trade Centers, the legal address, the fireman at the door said, oh guys, if you're going to go out here, you got to run for it. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, there's lots of debris falling from above. Should I look up? He said, no, go for it. I couldn't do that, so I kind of went out and snuck a look up, saw nothing coming. I said, Stanley, are you ready? I don't see anything. And he said, okay. And I said, let's go. And we ran for 1.5 blocks. When I ran out of gas, it was in front of a delicatessen, and I said to the vendor or the shopkeeper, I said, do you have any water? I said, we just come down 80 some odd floors. And he said, yeah, sure. And he went back in, he came out with a couple of bottles of water for us. He said, well, wait, right here. And he went back in, and he came back out with one of those breakfast platters, with a cellophane on it, sweet rolls and the melons all sliced, beautiful thing. He said, nobody's coming for this today. And he handed it to me. I said, well, thank you, started walking down the street carrying the breakfast platter. Out the back of Trinity Church, about 1.5 blocks south of the Trade Center, we came upon 2 priests from the backside of Trinity Church, and Stanley broke down, and he said, this man saved my life. Now the towers are still standing. So in my mind at that moment, there is no death, if you know what I mean. The towers are still up. And I responded, well, Stanley, if you think I saved your life, maybe your voice calling me onto the 81st floor saved my life. One of the priests said, let's have a prayer. So the 4 of us had a huddle in the middle of Church Street. There's no traffic. They've blocked all the traffic now. Had a prayer in the middle of Church Street. And then the other priest said, Trinity Church is open if you'd like to go in. And Trinity Church is on Broadway at the head of Wall Street, if any of you have been to that area. And it was about another block south. So we kind of eyeballed each other and said, yeah, let's do that. So we went 1 block south, walked up Rector Street. Now, Rector Street is a is a street that has a bit of a hill to it, and the cemetery at Trinity Church is above, up here. So as you walk up the hill, in relation to you, the cemetery kind of drops, and we got about 3/4 of the way up that street, right by Alexander Hamilton's gravesite, and Stanley turned more than 90 degrees back. And here's the grid again, and we're down here somewhere, southeast of the Trade Center. So when you look back, all you could see was the tower we came out of, blocking the view of the North Tower. And Stanley grabbed onto the railing at Trinity Church and he says, "You know, I think that tower could come down." I said, "There's no way. That's a steel structure. That's just carpets and furniture and drapery burning." And I didn't really finish that sentence. It was like we were invited to watch. Way up at the top, it kind of rocked a bit, and then boom, 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 it came down floor by floor, just accelerating, and the weight got greater and greater on the lower floors, and it all dissolved in front of us. 8 to 10 seconds, this loud whoosh, and some explosions as gas lines compressed. And we only saw the top 3/4 of it dissolve because Trinity Church actually blocked the bottom quarter of it from our view. But Trinity Church acted like a seawall, if you like. As that white wave came at us, it hit Trinity Church and exploded upward with the energy. And there's Stanley and I in this huge air bubble on Rector Street. And when we realized that wave was going to drop down on us, we ran up to Broadway a few yards, hard right, ran about a block as the wave sort of crashed down behind us and rolled down Broadway. And at random, we dove into 42 Broadway. Under stress, your brain does really funny things, because as I went through those doors at 42 Broadway, I was still carrying the breakfast platter. I can't explain that. You know, I didn't want to litter, you know, in the... But as we went through into that lobby, I put this breakfast platter up on the reception desk, and 25 strangers who did the same as Stanley and I were all nourished. In the midst of that chaos, we had sweetness and wetness, and it was a wonderful thing. Stanley gave me his personal business card. He and his wife had a little business at their home outside of what he did at Fuji Bank, so I had his home phone number and his address. I tucked it in my shirt pocket, and we talked for 45 minutes from 10 o'clock, which is when our building came down, until 11:45. At 10:30, the North Tower came down. We had no idea that happened because we were in this cocoon in 42 Broadway, and it was dark outside for a while, and then it got a little lighter, and then dark again, but we didn't know what that was, but it was the North Tower's ashes that surrounded the building we were in. At 11:45, we went out the back side, which is right behind the New York Stock Exchange. We went down Broad Street in snow. You know, there was a couple of inches of ash, and it was on parking meters and mailboxes and cars. It was like a winter snowfall in the area. And somehow, neither of us can explain this, we got separated. Suddenly, and it wasn't densely populated, it wasn't crowded. Suddenly, Stanley was nowhere to be seen. And this feeling washed over me that there is no Stanley. He was a guardian angel sent to get me out of that building. And I remembered the business card. And I paused for a moment, and I very slowly went into that pocket and yes, pulled out Stanley's business card. Now, if there was no business card, there'd be a heck of a story to tell you. However, I probably wouldn't be here. But there was a Stanley, so I knew I could get back to Stanley. I got over to the East River, started walking north, thinking, how am I going to get off this Manhattan Island, when I heard a bullhorn in the fog. Next ferry is for Jersey City. They don't have ferries over here for Jersey City, but I ran down this pier. I asked again, yeah, that one's going to Jersey City. That's in New Jersey. That's good enough for me. Didn't have to be my hometown. Just get me across the Hudson. I jumped on the ferry, and they closed the door behind me. I was the last one on that ferry. It left the pier. It chugged down the East River, around Battery Park, northwest across the Hudson, and as we broke, and everybody's on the ferry, da, 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 da. Where were you? What did you do? And the cacophony on that, the noise, it was a din on the ferry, and we broke into the fresh air, and then everybody could look to the east and see the hole in the sky. We all realized for the first time the enormity of what wasn't there. It was surreal. I had worked there for 27 years, and those towers, those immense towers, were always there, and now they were gone. It was something unimaginable. It didn't make sense. And at that time, my mind was protected because I'm thinking, wow, that's hard to believe. Gee, how could the steel do that? And all that stuff. I was not thinking. I wasn't frozen in terror. I wasn't thinking horrible thoughts of bodies being crushed. So somehow I was protected. It was a gift I accept. I don't take any credit for it. It just happened to me. That's my experience. When we got to Jersey City, being the last one on the ferry, I was the first one off. I ran down the pier into the ticket booth. I said, "Can I use your telephone?" The lady slid it across, sure. Picked up the phone, dialed home. Now, for sure, I shouldn't have connected this time. And it's now 11:15, an hour and 15 minutes after our tower collapsed, and my wife thought an hour and 15 minutes earlier for sure I was gone, as did the rest of my family and friends. And oblivious to any pain they were going through, because I was fine. I knew I was fine. I called home. It was the first time that my wife came in from an hour and 15 minutes of pacing outside. She came in to get a glass of water in the kitchen. As she went by the kitchen phone, it connected. She picked it up and she said, "I knew by the crackle on the phone that it was you." Now, our phone doesn't crackle, but there was this energy there that she sensed it was me. And again, oblivious to anything they were going through, I said, "Hi, honey, it's me." And she fainted away. I really didn't talk to her. A man picked it up and said, "Who's this?" And I said, "Well, who's this? You know, what's a man doing in my house?" He said, "It's Dave." I said, "Oh, hi, Dave." He said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in Jersey City." Like, don't you know that? I mean, I was clueless. He said, "We'll come and get you." I said, "They're not going to let anybody in here." He said, I said, "I'll walk up to Hoboken." He said, "I'll get a train home. I'll be okay." And I said, I got to put the phone down. Somebody else wants to use it. I sensed there was somebody over my shoulder. I put the phone down, and there were 40 people in a line wanting that phone, because no phones worked in Lower Manhattan. So there was this phone waiting for me. I walked 40 minutes up to Hoboken train station with hundreds of other people. As I walked into the station, the public address system announced at 5 minutes to noon, it said, "The 11:30 Bergen County train," my train, "which has been delayed, will be leaving in 5 minutes." So they even held a train for me that day. I got on that train. It was a bit of a milk run because it was kind of a special train, you know, letting people off at every stop. When I got to my car, the train station way up the line, drove home. It was 1:15 before I got home, but as I went in that driveway, horn blaring, big love fest on the front lawn, as you can imagine. So I was home at 1:15, and I was above impact. There were people stuck on Manhattan for a couple of days, and they were maybe up on 23rd Street, a mile away from the Trade Center. I don't know how to explain how all that unfolded for me that way, but that's the experience I had that day. I had the card now from Stanley. I called him, left a message. He was at the doctor's getting fixed up. He called me I finally got to sleep about 11 o'clock at night, and he called me a little after midnight to say that he got the message. So we had our first conversation early morning on the 12th. Media somehow got onto this story, and Stanley and I have been busy ever since, talking to church groups, business groups, charity groups, school groups about our experience. 1 week after, on the early morning of the Tuesday following, and 9/11 was a Tuesday that year, I fell into a deep dream. So I'm telling you again, I'm not putting any religious stuff at you, I'm telling what I experienced. I fell into a dream, and my dream was that I was lying in my bed, which is an odd thing to dream, but I was looking at the foot of my bed with my head up off the pillow, and to the foot of my bed came Jose Marrero. Jose was the man we passed on the 68th floor going up. And I looked at him, he had this glorious smile, a white blousy shirt, and I said, "Jose." In real time, I talked to him, "Jose, you're alive. How did you do that? You fooled everybody. That's amazing." In other words, I was really questioning. I wasn't saying, "Hey, let's go for a canoe ride," or something frivolous in a dream like you might say. I'm accusing him of something mysterious here. He didn't say anything. He just nodded like that to me. And I stared another second, shut my eyes, and shook the cobwebs. And of course, now he's gone, but it was so seamless, because there I was staring at the foot of my bed when I realized I'm waking up, that I sat up, looked around the room. Where did he go now? Beep, 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 my alarm went off. And woof, I had this feeling that I'd had this visitation, and I knew that Jose was fine. And I knew that all my coworkers are fine. And ever since that moment, I've had no trouble telling my story. I haven't had one nightmare from 9/11. My head hits the pillow, I fall asleep. And again, I take no credit for that. It's just the way it's unfolded for me. So for that, I'm eternally grateful. That's my story, but what was I left with? You know, what does it mean, if you like? I have found over the past 10 years, gosh, but it came fairly quickly. So this has been my experience for almost the full 10 years, that it's a waste of time to worry about unanswerable questions or try to answer them because they are unanswerable. You know, why me? Why not someone else? Now that may be easier said than done in a lot of cases, but if you logically think about it, they are unanswerable questions. So I suggest that if you are encountering that sort of thing, you not waste energy on unanswerable questions. Focus more on the future. Now when you do that, you know, it's an attempt to move forward, and it's a help to move forward, believe me. Don't worry about the future either, because you cannot say with certainty what the future is going to be, how it's going to unfold. It's great to have plans. I planned to be here today, and it happened. You planned to be here, and it happened. But boy, I could have had a flat tire on the way to the airport this morning, missed that flight, not been here. Whatever it is, you can't say with certainty what the future is going to be. Don't worry about it. It will unfold, you'll adjust. Well, if you don't dwell on the past, you don't worry about the future, it leaves you with the present. So that's where I live, very much in the present. Every day is a great day. Some are just greater than others. And I know that's a cliche. Another cliche is, you know, life is very precious. But you know what? Cliches are truths. And that is so true. Life is very precious. I just hope you realize it. It's difficult for folks your age to accept that life is very precious. This old timer can tell you it moves by pretty quickly. Be useful. Be useful. When you get to the end of your days, you want to look back and say, have I lived well? And by that I mean, have you used your gifts and talents for your benefit initially, and then of course for the benefit of others? That's what will bring you happiness. Have you loved well? Do you tell people you love them? Your family, your neighbors, your nation, the world. That's your responsibility. So get rid of all the petty hates, the bullying, the whatever else might be going on in your mind. There's always cool kids and uncool kids, but I suggest if you just look a little deeper behind that facade that you're all great kids and live well with each other, because you're going to, at the end of the trail, if you've lived well and loved well, you're going to have a legacy that the world will have been a better place for you having been there. I'm concluded, but I'm happy. The concept that their life is a gift, and they should celebrate that every day. That's what they need to know. You know, life is precious. That's the big message. And just don't take it for granted. Do some good things out there. And I did encourage them to do that.